She won't last much longer. Once she's out, we take the cabin. That was Rexton's voice. My son. We had just finished a short phone call, I'd reminded him. As always, about the extra set of keys I'd left in the drawer by the stairs. The cabin was due for its annual maintenance, and the contractor needed access. He'd said, "Got it. Thanks." And I had assumed that was the end of it. But Rexton never hung up, and neither did I. The line stayed open, and I was about to press the red button until I heard her voice. Savra. Light, amused, familiar in a way that now made my skin crawl. No more stew nights. No more group texts. She said, just silence and clean deeds. My hand tightened around the phone. I didn't move. I didn't breathe, for a moment. I told myself I must be confused, must have misunderstood. But then Rexton said, we'll say it was time, that she wanted to downsize, move to assisted living, something gentle, like I was a piece of furniture, quietly donated, discreetly removed. They didn't know I was still there. They didn't care. I stared out the kitchen window, watching wind stir the maple tree my husband and I had planted. The leaves shimmered, golden and innocent. The sunlight on the counter suddenly felt too bright, like I'd been caught eavesdropping in my own home. I could have spoken, screamed, demanded answers, but what would that change? This wasn't sudden. No, it had grown slowly, beneath tight smiles, and you're such a help. Mom. I sat still for a full minute before finally ending the call. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was decisive. I was Corvelyn Murray, and apparently, my expiration date had already been discussed without my consent. I made tea with steady hands, sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote one sentence. No one gets to delete me. Then I turned to a fresh page and started making a list. I ironed my blouse, tied on a soft pair of earrings, and brought a small tin of lemon shortbread, the ones Cassian used to sneak from my purse. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was instinct. For so many years, I showed up when invited. I didn't want them to see I already knew. Their driveway was cluttered 2 extra cars. I rang the bell. Savra answered, wearing a silk wrap and holding a glass of something cold and pink. Oh, hi. We thought maybe you weren't coming. I had the time, I said, stepping in. The living room buzzed with low music and laughter. Strangers filled the couch. The table was set buffet style, finger foods and napkins. Rexton appeared from the kitchen, blinking. Oh, hey, Mom. Tonight's just casual. I smiled as if I hadn't heard my own child plan my erasure 12 hours earlier. No plates, I asked lightly. Savra chuckled. Didn't feel like setting the table. It's just friends. You know. But she didn't mean me. I found a spot by the wall, next to the fiddle leaf fig I once gave them as a housewarming gift. No one offered a seat. No one asked me about my day. Even Cassian passed by with a juice box and didn't look twice. Actually, Savra said louder, raising her voice above the music. Since you're here, we wanted to chat about the cabin. Better to get paperwork moving while you're still healthy. She grinned like it was practical, like she hadn't just reduced my presence to a legal checkpoint. Still healthy, not still alive. I set the tin of cookies on the counter. No one touched them. Then I walked out the front door, slow and steady, my heels clicking against the wood like punctuation. They didn't follow me. No one called my name. But as I stepped into the cool evening, I wasn't thinking about what they'd done. I was thinking about what I was going to do next. I didn't sleep. Not because of grief, but because something inside me had shifted into clarity. The kind that burns away doubt. I sat at the dining table, lit only by the kitchen lamp, and opened the file drawer I hadn't touched in years. By dawn, I had signed the transfer, the cabin deed, every pine board, Every beam my late husband laid with his own hands was placed into an irrevocable trust, the kind that couldn't be undone. The beneficiaries were listed plainly Leora Marais and Cassian Marais. Rexton and Savra's names weren't mentioned once. Next, I called my realtor, list the apartment. I said, quick sale. No negotiation. I could almost hear her sit up straighter. I didn't explain why. The funds cleared faster than I expected. I opened an account under a foundation I had registered months earlier, just in case I ever needed a way out. Rewrote Foundation. No links to my name. No paper trail that led to me, just an entity with a purpose no one else would ever understand. I packed one carry-on, one coat. My husband's ring went into the side pocket. I didn't take photos, didn't take the dish set I loved or the music box from Leora's second birthday. I wasn't fleeing, I was cutting loose. When Rexton texted everything okay, I was already on a Greyhound, somewhere between Boise and Santa Fe, watching desert unfold through the window. I didn't answer. By the time I stepped into my rental in New Mexico, a sun-bleached casita with a creaking door and wild lavender out front, I had already submitted the name Change. Elira Norell. It sounded nothing like me. And yet, it fit like something I'd sewn by hand. No forwarding address, no announcements, just an absence where they expected obedience. And as I unpacked my coat, folded it over the chair, and ran my hand along the rough adobe wall, I didn't feel regret. I felt like air. The phone was still in airplane mode when I opened the second prepaid device and typed two names into its contact list, Leora and Cassian. Santa Fe gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Room. The kind of space that doesn't just stretch around you, but inside you. Sky that went on forever. And silence that wasn't lonely, just clean. The adobe cottage I rented sat at the edge of a dry arroyo. Its walls chipped and sun-warmed. The front door stuck. The faucet dripped. But it was mine. For now, a place where no one expected anything from me but the rent paid on time. I opened a P.O. box under my new name and let Corvelin Marais die quietly in bureaucratic peace. I burned the journals I had filled for decades, pages upon pages, trying to explain myself to people who never really listened. The smoke curled into the desert night like a soft goodbye. I bought 2 prepaid phones at a gas station just off the highway. They came in thin plastic boxes. No contracts, no names. I charged both that evening and packed each into a small envelope. No return address. No handwriting they'd recognize. To Leora and Cassian, I simply wrote, "Use this to talk to me. Don't tell anyone." I mailed them from different counties 2 days apart. Then I waited. In the meantime, I joined a local co-op that sold goat cheese and glass beads. I signed up to volunteer twice a week. I started baking again, sourdough, olive oil cake, banana muffins that made the neighbors wave more than once. At the pool near the plaza, I swam slow laps in the early morning. No one knew my story. No one called me mom or asked me for anything. I wasn't hiding. I was living, not as the version of me that always made room for others, but as someone rebuilding shape from her own breath. Days passed. The phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, but I didn't panic. Sometimes, distance is a seed, and sometimes, it takes time to grow into something that remembers where it came from. It wasn't a call. It came as a whisper, folded into the quiet of a forgotten inbox. I hadn't checked that old book club email in months, but something made me log in. There it was, subject line. "Just so you know, a former neighbor, Ellen, had written, 'They're looking for you. Said you vanished. Something about the cabin being locked and your number disconnected.'" I stared at the message for a long time, sipping my coffee slowly as the desert morning light spilled across the floor. They didn't know the deed was untouchable now, locked behind the language of an irrevocable trust. They didn't know the apartment had sold before Rexton ever thought to visit. They didn't know I'd walked away, not in fear, but with clarity. Savra had apparently gone live on her social media accounts, teary-eyed, calling it a painful family abandonment. The kind of performance people mistake for vulnerability. Rexton had tried using the cabin as collateral for a business loan. The bank declined ownership now rested entirely with the trust. They were scrambling, and they were powerless. That same afternoon, the prepaid phone lit up for the first time. Leora. The message was short. Typed in lowercase, "They think you're gone forever." I said, "Maybe you're just done being ignored." I read it 3 times before responding. "I never left you." No emojis. No grand gestures. Just truth in its most stripped form. She didn't reply immediately, and I didn't need her to. The line was open now. That was enough. I went for a walk just before dusk, letting the wind catch the hem of my coat. The piñon trees whispered low, and the earth smelled of dust and something clean beneath it. At the market the next day, I bought extra apples and cinnamon, Leora's favorite, for baked oats. I didn't know when she'd be ready to call, but when she was, I wanted her to hear warmth in my voice, not bitterness. She was never the reason I left, but she might be the reason I stayed gone. I was thumbing through the local news from back home when the headline caught my eye, small, buried beneath weather reports and school board updates. Local developer, injured in winter wreck near Bend. No names in the title, but I knew. I clicked. There he was. Rexton. Pale. Strapped to a gurney. An oxygen mask covering half his face. The article mentioned black ice, a late-night drive, a sharp curve, broken ribs, crushed pelvis, multiple surgeries ahead. He was still alive. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel much of anything at first, just a cold quiet in my hands, like the coffee mug I'd forgotten to sip. Savra had launched a fundraiser. The link was at the bottom of the article. Glossy photo, polished plea support, a loving father and husband during recovery. It had already raised over $10,000. I clicked once, then closed it. Instead, I logged into the Owlroot account. I contacted the kids' school using a quiet channel I'd arranged months ago and paid the full spring tuition under Norell Family Benefit. No fanfare. No explanation. No attachment. That night, the prepaid phone buzzed against my kitchen counter. Leora. A voice note. Soft and unsure. Ba didn't say it was her, but I knew. Thank you. Just those words. No name. No question. I sat in my car to listen again, where it was dark and still. Her voice poured into me like warm rain on dry ground. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until she said thank you. And my shoulders let go. I typed back, "I'll always show up. Just not the way they expect." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She knew now the distance was never about her. It was about survival. I stepped out of the car and looked up at the stars, clear and ancient, like the parts of me I was only just starting to remember. Then I went inside and began writing a letter, not to Rexton, but to the lawyer who managed the trust. The letter was short, 4 sentences, printed in bold, simple type on heavy parchment. There was no greeting, no closing, only conditions. If you wish for continued support for Leora and Cassian, do not attempt contact. Do not challenge the trust. Do not restrict their private communication. Violation ends everything. I folded the page once, sealed it with wax dark green, smooth and clean, and placed it in an unmarked envelope. No signature, no return address. I paid extra for a courier delivery. I wanted a knock at their door, not a flutter in their mailbox. I didn't include a threat. I didn't need to. There was nothing left they could take from me. 3 days passed, No texts. No emails. No sudden attempt at sweetness or guilt. Nothing. Perfect. They understood me now. Not the me who used to bring casserole and wait politely in the kitchen. Not the one who used to make excuses when they forgot my birthday. Or rewrote family history in public posts. This was the new language. Silence as sentence. Silence as sovereignty. I took the prepaid phone out that night and sent a short message to Leora. You're protected. They know now. She replied with a heart. Cassian sent a photo of his science project, 2 glowing jars labeled before and after. Something about evaporation. I didn't cry, but I did stare at the picture longer than I meant to, letting my breath return slowly. The next morning, I walked to the post office and mailed 2 care packages books. Tea, postcards I'd collected from art walks. No return info, just stickers of owls and stars. Later that week, the lawyer emailed to confirm all compliance clauses had been reviewed and legally reinforced. Everything was in place. No more surprise visits, no more frantic phone calls. Just the firm boundary of silence and the soft, growing bridge of trust between me and the only 2 people who had never tried to erase me. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. The unraveling was quiet. No headlines this time, just a trail of digital dust. Rexton's license was suspended after his 3rd missed court appearance tied to a failed zoning deal. The state board flagged him for misrepresentation. I found the notice buried in a public records database I still knew how to navigate. Old habits die hard. Savra, meanwhile, lost 3 major sponsors in the span of 2 months. A former intern had leaked emails. Screenshots of branding partnerships that were mostly borrowed luxury. The facade cracked, and the followers fled. Her curated world dimmed by degrees. And eventually, she went private. Leora sent me a message one evening. They sold the condo, moved in with Cousin Thad. They don't talk about you anymore. I think they know you're not coming back. She was right again. I wasn't coming back, not as the woman they thought I was. Instead, I planted thyme and basil in wide clay pots along the windowsill. I joined a seniors hiking group that met every Thursday. I adopted a retired greyhound from the shelter and named him Chapter, because that's what he felt like the beginning of something I chose. I also began teaching local history at the co-op. Just 2 afternoons a week, I brought artifacts, told stories, passed around old letters and worn maps. My students listened with soft eyes and called me Miss Elira. And none of them asked where I came from. I laughed more. I slept better. I stopped looking over my shoulder for apologies that were never coming. Every once in a while, I'd find an old picture of myself tucked inside a book. I never tore it up. I just closed the cover and shelved it again. That woman had tried so hard to be loved by people who only needed her quiet compliance. But I was no longer quiet. I was no longer waiting. I was never lost, just no longer where they expected me to be. And in a little over 2 weeks, 2 suitcases would arrive at the Greyhound station with the names Leora and Cassian on the tags. The burner phone lit up while I was kneading dough. A video call. Leora. I wiped my hands on a towel, heart thudding in that strange rhythm of joy laced with fear. I had imagined this moment, rehearsed it, and still I hesitated. Then I tapped. Accept. Her face appeared, framed by soft curls and sunlight from a window behind her. Her eyes shimmered. I finally get to see you, she said, her voice catching, before I could answer. Cassian leaned into the frame, grinning with the same crooked smile he'd had since he was 5. You look different, he said, tilting his head, but still like Arlita. I laughed shaky. Real. I've had some time to grow. I said. We'd been messaging for nearly 3 years, passing voice notes, photos, and quiet updates like secret threads through a wall. But this seeing each other, face to face, felt like sunlight after a long, patient winter. Leora reached forward as if touching the screen would bring us closer. "We've been saving," she whispered. "Spring break. Just us. If it's okay." My breath hitched. "It's more than okay," I said. They started listing ideas, their voices overlapping: hikes, movie nights, cinnamon rolls, sea glass hunting. I wrote it all down. Even though I already knew I'd remember every word, we made a plan. Quiet, careful, just ours. The visit would be short, 5 days, just enough to breathe the same air and not feel like ghosts to one another. They would arrive by bus. I'd wait at the station, wearing a blue scarf. Leora said she'd be the one carrying a book with a sunflower on the cover. Cassian promised to bring me something he made in shop class, a surprise. When the call ended, I sat still for a while. Hands folded, eyes closed. I didn't think about what I had lost, only what I had made room for. Outside, Chapter stirred from his nap, stretched, and rested his head on my foot. Inside, the silence was no longer empty. It was full of waiting, full of love, full of a spring I had planted with my own hands. The cottage smelled of warm bread, rosemary, and the citrus soap Cassian insisted on using, even though it made his eyes sting. Leora played music from her phone while we folded laundry together. Chapter followed them from room to room like an old guardian rediscovering his pack. They stayed for 1 week. We walked the Arroyo Trail every morning, made sandwiches with too much mustard, and watched movies late into the night with our feet tangled in blankets. We kept our promise: no calls, no posts, no sharing the location. Just us. Just the time we were owed. On the 3rd night, I gave them the box. Inside were letters, each dated, one for every birthday I'd missed. I had written them in real time, folded with care. Some smudged from tears, others from cinnamon or ink or the desert wind. One by one, they opened them. Cassian cried first, quietly, shoulders shaking while Leora reached for his hand. Then Leora looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. "Will you ever come back?" I didn't answer right away. I wiped my hands on my lap, then looked at them, really looked. "Not because I can't," I said softly, "but because I remember what it cost me to be silent in someone else's story." They nodded. They understood, maybe more than I'd hoped. We stayed up that night baking, the way we used to when they were little. Leora cracked the eggs wrong. Cassian dropped flour on the dog. I laughed until my ribs ached. And in the morning, when the bus came, I gave them each a hug that didn't let go too quickly. "You'll always know where to find me," I whispered. As the dust settled behind their ride home, I stood on the porch and let the wind wrap around me. I hadn't vanished. I had simply rewritten the ending. And this time, the story was mine.